Hello friends, welcome to the Anatomy Hub. So today we'll study about the parotid gland, or you can say the salivary gland, one of the salivary gland. So the oral cavity is an important point of entry for both the respiratory and the digestive tracts. It also houses the tongue, which plays an important integral role in speech, ingestion, and the swallowing. Due to the oral cavity's constant exposure to the external environment, it is easy for the organs within the mouth to get dry. In addition to ingesting the fluids, the body also releases a modest amount of secretions to help with keeping the area moist. As well as it is facilitating the digestive processes. The salivary gland aid in this process by secreting the saliva, which has protective, digestive, and lubricating properties. Salivary glands are a subtype of exocrine glands, which are glandular in structures that involve a duct system to release their products into an epithelial surfaces. So this differs from the endocrine glands like your adrenal, thyroid glands that release their products directly into the bloodstream. So there are two sets of the salivary gland within our oral cavity that is responsible for the secretions. So the major and minor salivary glands, the major salivary glands are all paired and consist of the parotid gland, submandibular gland, sublingual gland, and all they are encapsulated and have their own ducts through which all the saliva that is secreted into the buccal cavity. The minor salivary glands, they are numerous in number, 600 to 1000 glands are mostly unnamed and are widely distributed throughout the oral cavity. Those that are named include the labial, buccal, molar, palatine, and the lingual glands. So, but the major salivary glands and the minor glands, they are not encapsulated and they either share duct systems with adjacent salivary glands or have their own. So in this video we will focus on the parotid gland that you can observe here, and we'll discuss the information about its little bit embryology, gross anatomy, and related structures, and some histological point of view, neurovascular supply, and the lymphatic drainage. So there are several things we will do here throughout all this video, so which will also help in understanding the anatomy of this gland. So additionally also we will see the clinical discussions about the pathological processes that are associated with the parotid gland, that also will include over here. So first we will see the gross anatomy of the parotid gland. So for that we will have a model over here. So here you can see the model which has the two pairs of parotid gland that we will observe here, and here this is the lateral part of your face where you will get the parotid gland. So what we will do here, we will just remove the skin so that you will get the parotid gland. See the underneath structures that is present over there. So we'll have a cut section from the zygomatic arch above to the zygomatic arch, and just surrounding to the orbicularis angularis. Then here we will find the base of the mandible. So below 2 inch we will also do the things. So here we will get this total area, we will remove the skin so that you will get the parotid gland. Okay, so now you can see the after the skin removal, you can see the fat pads that is present over here along with the superficial fascia. So here you can observe the superficial fascia that derived from the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia, and that comes upward and by covering deep to the platysma muscle, then it ascends upward and attaches to the base of the mandible. Then it splits into two lamina which covers to the submandibular gland over here. Then it also covers to the parotid gland by splitting into two lamina, and it covers whole over the parotid gland and attaches superficially the superficial lamina to the zygomatic arch over here. So this is your zygomatic arch, and here during the ascending it also splits and encloses the masseter muscle that you can see here. Now this fascia in green is your parotidomasseteric fascia, which is the tough membrane fascia that covers to the parotid gland and to the masseteric muscle. So each individual, all they gifted with a pair of parotid glands that are situated in the preauricular area, that is flattened region anterior to the tragus that you can observe here, and it is largest of the three major glands, like the other being the submandibular sublingual glands. So this parotid gland that we will see after removal of the parotid fascia, parotidomasseteric fascia. So here we will just remove layer by layer so that you will get the. So here we have removed the fascia. Right now this is the fascia which is actually the deep fascia of the masseteric muscle. So that also will remove here so that you will get the proper parotid gland. So this, okay, so we have removed here the fascia that covers to the parotid gland. Now you can clearly see the parotid gland. Here you can see this is your parotid gland. So this parotid gland, that is it weighs around 15 to 30 grams each gland, and they are irregular in shape and the size, consisting of the superficial and deep lobe, and it is tan yellow in color that you can observe over here, that it is yellow in appearance, mainly the tan yellow appearance. So although the parotid gland that can be described being irregular, but its general outline is that of a inverted pyramid shaped, and the base is the most superior part of the gland, while the blunted apex that you can observe here, that is points inferiorly, and it also has the anteromedial, posteromedial and superficial surface. So whatever it is visible over here, that is actually the superficial surface. So we'll see the borders. So here you will find the superiorly you will find the zygomatic arch. Superiorly you will find the zygomatic arch. Posterior superiorly you will find the external acoustic meatus and the ramus of the mandible that you can observe here, and posterior inferiorly by the mastoid process that will be over here, and the distal part of the mastoid head of the sternocleidomastoid muscle that you can observe after removing out the fat and the skin. Now here at this section you can observe that how the parotid gland inferiorly it is related by the inferior part of the mastoid process and the sternocleidomastoid muscle, and inferiorly you will find the gland it is limited by the sternocleidomastoid muscle over here, and anteriorly it is limited by the masseter muscle. Anteriorly the masseter muscle that forms the another boundary. So the superior surface of the gland that is actually covered by the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia and posterior fiber of the platysma muscle, and the lymphatic tracts, the fibers of the great auricular nerve, that is the branch of the facial nerve, and the skin, the deep surface of the gland that is related to the buccinator muscle, that you can observe here about the buccinator muscle here. Now we will see what are the structures that passing through the parotid gland. So here you can see the gland that is actually separated into the superficial and the deep lobes by the cranial nerve 7th. So here you can see this is your 7th cranial nerve or the facial nerve. So within the substance of the parotid gland, the facial nerve that divides into two, that is superior and the inferior part. So the superior part otherwise known as your temporofacial part, and the inferior branch or the inferior division is known as your cervicofacial division. So the part of this gland that is medial to this cranial nerve 7th is the deep lobe, and anterior to that this lobe is the superficial lobe. So another important structure that passes through the parotid gland and divides within the substance of the parotid gland is the external carotid artery that you can observe over here. So this external carotid artery, as it passes through the posteromedial aspect of the gland, it gives of the maxillary artery as well as the superficial temporal artery that you can observe over here. This is your superficial temporal artery, and the maxillary artery that is hidden here by the parotid gland. Occasionally it also gives of the posterior auricular artery that you can observe here. And the third structure that passes through the parotid gland is the retromandibular vein that can be observed over here. So as you can see here, this is your anterior division of the retromandibular vein. It is the product of the union of the superficial temporal and the maxillary veins. They enter the parotid gland at the same point that their corresponding arteries leave the gland. So it passes caudally towards the apex of the parotid gland, and it leaves posteriorly to divide into anterior and posterior branches. Then the vein that joins with the facial vein that you can observe over here. So this is your facial vein, and later they joins to the posterior auricular vein also. So this parotid gland, though it is a exocrine gland, so you will find a duct over here. So this duct that you can see, so here you can see the parotid duct that is also known as the Stenson's duct, that you can see visible in your green. So two major duct actually they arising from this parotid gland that unite within the substance of this organ to form the parotid duct of Stenson. So the parotid duct, it is actually the 7 cm long and 3 mm the width of this duct, and it leaves the superior part of the anteromedial surface of the gland that you can observe over here, and it passes horizontally over the surface of the masseter muscle. Then it courses medially towards the anterior border of this masseter muscle. Then the dog makes an abrupt right turn to cross the buccinator muscle, and associated with the buccal fat pad also. So the parotid duct, it has actually the, and this duct will eventually pierce the buccal mucosa to enter the oral cavity via the papilla adjacent to the upper second molar tooth. The submucosal course actually that provides a valve mechanism to prevent the reflux of air into the gland and during the instance of the raised intraoral pressure. For example, while you are blowing out the cheeks, occasionally there is an isolated accessory parotid gland which was historically referred to as the Socia parotidis. It along with the transverse facial artery and rests on the superior border of the parotid duct. The accessory duct that gives off about 5 to 6 ductules that join the main parotid duct, and this main parotid duct will open to the second molar tooth. So the accessory duct is also superiorly related to the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve, and the buccal branch of the facial nerve also travels with the parotid duct as it goes towards the buccinator muscle. Now we will see the vascular supply. Mainly first we will see the arterial supply. So the artery that you can observe here, the external carotid artery, and these arteries they traverses through the substance of the parotid gland and also responsible for supplying and draining the parotid gland. So the arterial supply that arises from the branches of the external carotid artery, while the venous drainage is via the retromandibular vein, and the lymphatic fluids that drains to the superior deep cervical lymph nodes. Here you will find lymphatic fluid drains to the superior deep cervical lymph nodes. So the branches of the external carotid artery that supply the parotid gland are the superficial temporal artery that you can observe over here, the maxillary artery, and indirectly it also takes the blood from the facial arteries. So the external carotid artery that travels parallel to the mandible, after leaving the carotid bifurcation that you can observe over here, it continues towards the parotid gland to enter the substance of the organ. Here it gives off the superficial temporal branch and the maxillary branch. Which both the terminal branch of the external carotid artery. So the superficial temporal artery that supplies the superior aspect of this gland, while the maxillary artery that we will find over here after removing the parotid gland that supplies the medial aspect of this gland. The transverse facial artery that you can observe here that supplies the superior aspect of the gland, and that actually arises from the superficial temporal artery. So this artery that not only supplies to the parotid gland but also it supplies to the duct nearby the masseter muscle. So for the venous drainage we have to remove this parotid gland to see the venous drainage, how they drains from the parotid gland. So here you will find the parotid gland, and from here you will find the maxillary vein and the superficial temporal vein, which travels alongside their similar named arteries that drains the deoxygenated blood from the parotid gland, and the veins they unite together and forms your retromandibular vein. So this is your posterior division of the retromandibular vein, and this is your anterior division of the retromandibular vein. So all they actually here you will find the, so this is your actually the retromandibular vein which traverses the substance of the parotid gland that we have removed. As it leaves the gland, it gives the branches as a posterior and the anterior division of the retromandibular vein. The anterior division of the retromandibular vein that descends downward towards the apex of the parotid gland, and it leaves the substance of this gland, and sometimes it unites with the facial vein and also with the lingual veins. It gives rise to the common facial vein that you can observe over here. So this is your common facial vein, and here you will find the common facial vein which drains into the internal jugular vein that you can observe over here. Similarly, the posterior division of the retromandibular vein that leaves the posterior border of the parotid gland, and here it may unite with the post-auricular vein that you can observe over here, and finally drains into the external jugular vein. Here you can observe how the parotid gland through the parotid gland, how the facial nerve that actually divides into two branches, and how the retromandibular vein forms, and how the external carotid artery that divides into two branches is a superficial temporal artery and the maxillary artery. And here you can see, though it is a conical shape, so here you will find the anterior border, and this is your posterior border, and here you will find the medial border. So this medial border that actually divides this surface is a anteromedial surface and the posteromedial surface, and this surface is your superficial surface. And here you can see how the retromandibular vein that drains to the external division and the anterior division and the posterior division. The anterior division that drains to the common facial vein, and the facial vein will drain to the internal jugular vein, whereas the posterior division that may drain to the posterior auricular vein and finally will drain to the external jugular vein. So at the base you can see how the nerve of the facial nerve mainly it divides into temporofacial and the cervicofacial. Then the temporofacial that gives branches as a temporal branch, as a zygomatic branch and the upper buccal branch, and the cervicofacial that gives as a lower buccal branch, the marginal mandibular branch and the cervical branch. So the temporal branch of the facial nerve and the superficial temporal vessels and the auriculotemporal nerve, these three structures they passes through this parotid gland. Here you can see the anteromedial surface that actually deeply grouped by the ramus of the mandible, and the relations mainly here you will see the posterior and inferior part of the masseter muscle, and here you will find the posterior border of ramus of the mandible, and here you will find the medial pterygoid muscles, mainly the insertion of the medial pterygoid muscle. So the deep part of the parotid gland that is closely related to the medial pterygoid muscle, whereas the superficial part that is related to the masseter muscle. So what happens here? This facial uh, nerve, this facial nerve actually divides this parotid gland into two parts, the deep lobe and the superficial lobe. At the posteromedial surface, you will find so many extensions that actually towards the mastoid process with the sternocleidomastoid muscle you will find. At the styloid process with the muscles that is the stylohyoid muscle you will find, and you will find the deep to the styloid process. Here you will find the internal carotid artery, the internal jugular vein, and in between these two you will find there is the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th cranial nerves they passes out. That means you will find this foramen is the jugular foramen. So the facial nerves after coming out of the stylomastoid foramen, it pierces this parotid gland and enters into this parotid gland, and first it lodges inside the groove, then it divides into two divisions. What I have told you is the temporofacial and the cervicofacial. Like that, the external carotid artery that actually that situates inside the groove of the parotid gland. After that, it actually pierces the gland and lodges inside this parotid gland. So here you can see the opening of the parotid duct. And this is the surface marking of the parotid duct that you can observe over here. So the various processes of the parotid gland that you can see here. One will find the facial process that is superficial to the masseter along the parotid duct, and you will find the accessory parotid gland and the duct if it is present, then the pterygoid process, that is between the mandibular ramus and the pterygoid muscle, and you'll find the glenoid process that between the external meatus that you will find over here and the capsule of the temporomandibular joint. Pre and post styloid process, in front you will find that is related to the internal carotid, and behind you will find the internal jugular vein. So the structures that passing through the parotid is the facial nerve, the retromandibular vein, and the external carotid artery. So the nerve supply to this parotid gland is very much important, because though the facial nerve that passes through the parotid gland, but it is not supplying to the parotid gland. So here this parotid gland, it actually the secretomotor from the ninth cranial nerve, that is the glossopharyngeal nerve. So what happens here, the ninth cranial nerve, after relaying at the otic ganglion, it merges with the auriculotemporal nerve and supplies to the parotid gland, which is actually helps in the secretion of the saliva. Along with that, with the sympathetic fibers, they actually will come through the external carotid artery and will pass through the otic ganglion, but they will not relay inside the otic ganglion. They will just merge with the auriculotemporal nerve and will supply to the parotid gland for the vasomotor action. Some applied aspect you will find over here, that is the pathogenesis that associated with the salivary glands, that may range from the infectious to the non-infectious inflammatory processes. Within the non-infectious class of the disorder, there may be the benign or the neoplastic phenomenon occurring within the parotid region. So you have to ask the patient about the history of pain and swelling in the region of the parotid gland, and you have to determine the relationship of pain and swelling to meals as acute onset of pain and swelling with salivation, that is indicative of an obstructed duct, and some patients may complain about a lump in the gland that determine if there has been any change in size of the mass and over what period of time this has occurred. That also you have to ask the patient about the symptoms, such as your unintentional weight loss, night sweats, and the low grade fevers, as this may be suggestive of the non benign processes. Other important aspects that include the history of the dry mouth and or the history of the autoimmune disorders and the vaccination history. All these factors are actually suggestive of the diffuse issue with this gland. Along with that, you will find the sialolithiasis, means the parotid gland stone. There you will find the calculi or the stones in the salivary gland. They are actually more common in submandibular gland than the parotid gland. And the presence of the stone that obstructs the flow of the saliva from the gland, that leading to the acute swelling with meals. The swallowing usually resolves about an hour after the onset of the symptom. So palpation of the duct or the visualization of the duct orifice will reveal the offending agent, and the plain radiography may also reveal the presence of the stones. So another condition that you will find is the parotitis. So parotitis that may be infectious or it may be non-infectious inflammatory process that can affect the parotid glands, and you will find the mumps infection that caused by the mumps rubella virus, and a cause of painful swelling of this parotid gland it appears in the childhood, and fortunately this has become a, historical teaching point with the advent of the mumps vaccine given with the measles and the rubella vaccines during the routine vaccine programs. But there are other pathogens that are able to incite the inflammatory response within the salivary glands. So that may be due to the influenza, the Coxsackie, the cytomegalovirus, and some human immunodeficiency virus, or you can say the uh, granula granulomatous infections, that is due to the tuberculosis, and will find some ecovirus. So the infectious process that usually result in the bilateral manifestation of this disease with painful swelling to both the glands, and there are usually systemic sign of the infection such as erythema, means you'll find the redness around the area, the malaise, the tenderness and fever, and these disorders are highly communicable, and adequate precautions should be taken to limit their spread. The duration of the parotitis as well as the choice of treatment that is dependent on the underlying cause of the inflammation. For example, if the cause of the parotitis is an influenza infection, then the course of illness that would be self-limiting as a healthy immune system will eradicate the virus over a few days. However, if you will find the cause of the parotitis is related to the human immunodeficiency virus, means the HIV, then a cure will be dependent on the control of the virus, that is the compliance with the antiretroviral medications, and in the suppurative sialadenitis, in this process that is similar to the acute parotitis, with the exception that the offending agent that will not be viral origin, that will be the bacterial in origin, and it may also occur that is post operatively as well as in case what will find the flow of the saliva that will be inhibited. The static saliva that acts as a nidus, means a place where the development of something is promoted for the bacterial proliferation, and this situation such as the dehydration, the trauma or the immunosuppression that may the predispose individuals to these type of conditions. So patient with the acute suppurative uh, sialadenitis that may have an addition to the painful swelling. The cutaneous changes will be there, means you'll find the erythema and the purulent that consists of the pus and discharge from the ducts of the affected gland. So resident oral flora, means the Haemophilus influenza, or the Escherichia coli, or the Streptococcus pneumonia, and the Streptococcus aureus, they all are common offenders that isolated from the cultures of the purulent discharge. So friends, here we have almost all completed the parotid gland, and some clinical relations. So thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe for the new videos. And please press the bell icon so that you will get the new notifications when I will upload the video. So thank you.